Hello and welcome to FinTech Impact. I'm your host, Jason Pereira. Today's show, I have Daniel Lohrfink, CPO at Wealth.com. Wealth.com is a well-known name in the US space, having basically been one of the key players in the estate planning space, but expanding since then. And with that, here's my interview with Daniel. Danny, thanks for taking the time today.
Thanks for having me, Jason.
So Daniel Lohrfink at Wealth.com. Tell us about Wealth.com.
At Wealth.com, we are the leading advanced planning solution in the wealth management space. We've been at it since before AI was cool. We introduced our first trained machine learning model, free ChatGPT launch in November 2022. And that started with estate planning. There's a very fun origin story to it, but we started in the estate planning space, identifying an arena in wealth management that was largely untouched by technological disruption, and have since made a number of investments into broadening the scope into broader advanced planning areas such as tax planning.
Okay, AI before AI was cool. Good to know. Also, I will say purveyors of the single greatest set of swag ever been sent. Thanks for this. All right, so give me the origin story. How did you guys come to be?
So co-founders built a business. My co-founders, by the way, are Brazilian. And so you have to factor that into this. They built a business called Email. They literally took the word email and age and smushed it together. And that was the name of the company, Email. They had tremendous success with it. They ended up selling it to LexisNexis for a large chunk of change. And they went through and had a liquidity event in which they needed to coordinate with their financial advisor, their CPA, and their trust and estate attorney. And they realized
They're like, why is this so broken? Sorry.
Yeah, they realized what we all realized, which is, hey, this should be unified. In particular, it was the estate piece that was completely divorced from the financial planning process. And that was the start of Wealth.com. Now, of course, then you get into how did we acquire Wealth.com as a domain name and all that stuff. And I will just tell you straight up, our chairman here at Wealth.com, his name is Ray. He is just one of those individuals that once he locks his sights on something, he doesn't let go. And so he had this vision and he said, before we even write a single line of code, we're buying this domain name. There's stories about how the acquisition went down. Some people say it was a poker game in Tijuana, where some person put the domain name and some person put down the keys to the Lamborghini in that poker game. But no, it was just a clean domain name that was owned by an individual for 30 plus years, never been used. And there was a vision for what the company could become. And he took a bet on it. And here we are today.
I'm so disappointed the poker story isn't real.
We can make it real.
We'll say it's real.
We're going to have to sell the domain name again or put it down on the.
Oh yeah, that'll go really well with your VCs. Okay.
Oh no, our investors will be thrilled.
They'll be super thrilled. All right. All kidding aside. So you guys, well-known entity, your previous guest as well, Raphael, was on previously, quite a while back now. I'll look that up later. But more recently, in terms of your expansion, I guess the biggest news around you guys is raising how much money? Like 65 million?
Yeah, it was a $65 million round and all of the previous investors participated in it, doubling down on the mission. A whole bunch of new investors, a part of the story, brought our total fundraise to date above 100 million. And it's just going straight into R&D and investment so that we can continue to improve the experience for our advisor partners downstream to their clients.
I was going to say, what are you going to do with all that 65? As I asked everybody, you got to just do the Scrooge McDuck vault and go for a swim. But no one has said yes to that. No one has said yes to that. So one day. Okay. So first off, starting off specifically in the in the estate space, and the key value propositions were upload estate documents. We'll tell you everything. It will tell you how to improve them. Client, you can walk a client through the entire process and then turn it over to them for them to sign off on it on their end. And of course, there was a little bit of AI in the loop that basically, hey, you change addresses, we'll update and make sure that you're still on board. So that was the original last update that this podcast got, right? A while back. Talk to me about what's happened since then.
Yeah. So you're spot on. I view it as quadrants. And so you have quadrants within the wealth management space as it relates to estate planning. And you have two axes. You have the X axis and the Y axis that represents if a client has an existing estate plan. And so you either don't have a plan or you do have a plan. And then the other axis, the Y axis, is the client's net worth and level of complexity, right? And so if you do not have an estate plan and you don't have high degree of complexity, you should probably have a will, should probably have a trust, should probably have a healthcare directive. And so our system enables advisors and their clients to collaborate to get the client set up with those core estate planning documents. Okay. Again, staying with that same client profile, not super complex, mass affluent, let's call it low, high net worth territory, but they do have an estate plan in place. Well, we should probably review that plan. We should probably make sure that plan is in line with the financial plan that we've developed, given that is the end game to the financial plan. So that was the next step. And that was the next quadrant that we filled in our product feature set, was introducing the AI capabilities to read through estate documents, summarize it, pull out all of the key information in a clean flowchart format for the client to review and to understand, but also to identify any gaps or areas of improvement. That is where I say that we were AI before cool. And I hate when people say that, because it's, come on, dude, like everyone now these days are saying that it was AI before it was cool. But the reason why I say that is because
you were pre-Gen AI. Like you, let's be
we were
frank.
pre-Gen AI. And so we actually built our own data set. And so we weren't leveraging one of these frontier models. We were leveraging our own data set, where we had trust in estate attorneys. I kid you not. We had trust in estate attorneys manually reading through hundreds, and then it got to thousands of wills and trusts and highlighting them and saying, this is a credit shelter trust provision. It might be called a family trust. It might be called a bypass trust. It might be called a disclaimer trust. Doesn't matter. It's the text that describes the function that we care about. So this is that. And then over time, once you accumulate enough examples of this is a credit shelter trust, doesn't matter that if a keyword is there or not, it is the sentiment behind the words that indicate whether or not this is a credit shelter trust. So that was the initial pass at what we have today, which is our AI called Esther. That was the initial pass. Of course, once frontier models came into being, we're able to then just take what we had already done, that proprietary data set, slap it on top as a fine-tuned set of information to then make the frontier models even more powerful, right? So that was like that next generation lift. And when you talk about AI in today's world, you want to be building so that your AI is able to be a harness around the frontier models, right? Your systems can be a harness around the frontier models. So as they improve, so too does your overall system. And that's effectively what you get with our tool.
Yeah, I got to say, it's interesting. You basically got there first. And if you hadn't, quite honestly, I think it would be a couple of companies followed you by the same time. It was pretty similar to this time. You guys were the fastest growing category until AI and note takers came out. And frankly, if you hadn't got there and gotten as much market share as you guys did previously, it would be a mad scramble right now. You know, you got into a position early, just early enough to take advantage of what was there, to capture market share, and then evolve in line with the value proposition of market share. Very straightforward. But man, it was close.
100%. Preparation meets opportunity, right? That was the luck of it. We were very, very lucky. We hit it all at the right time. And because we hit it at the right time, you have this adoption curve that I'm sure you see all the time, Jason. But within the wealth management industry, you have this technological adoption curve of the early adopters and then downstream to the laggards, right? And that usually follows the pathway of individual independent RIAs, independent broker dealers, to then the large wirehouses. And that's the same curve that we saw. And so we started out with independent RIAs, had a lot of success there. Then the broker dealers, the LPLs of the world came and said, okay, there are a lot of RIAs that are affiliated with us that keep talking about your tool. We want to take a look. And ultimately, then that made its way to the wirehouses because they were saying, hey, we need to keep up. There are all these independent RIAs that are adopting all these new technologies, and it's making us look like fools in meetings. And I won't say all wirehouses. There are some, one of my alma mater, which you can look up. I'm not going to say it on this podcast, but my alma mater, where I come from, they were actually not that way. They were at the forefront of it. They were engaging with us actually in the very early days. But now it's to your point, one of those accepted things where if you're not tackling the distribution of estate services at scale, you're falling behind. And
You left
that
out a value proposition that was deep and very necessary, and now it's we're not quite a checkbox level need yet, but we're getting there.
I completely agree. We're not there yet. We're not there yet. There's obviously all the studies that you can read in the world about the family office experience and clients' expectations versus what advisors actually deliver to them. But the truth of the matter is, until we get to a place where somebody's holistic wealth picture is what is that checkbox, which is the tax planning, the estate planning, the investment management, the financial planning, et cetera, this will continue to be an industry that chips away. I think that we still are probably another 5 years out from that completed.
And like I said, prior to AI note takers, you guys were the fastest adoption rate anyone ever seen. And it made a lot of sense. You were addressing a pain point. You were addressing a pain point that's very real, like the lack of wills, lack of estate planning, and the like, I almost say intimidation factor, the perceived complexity factor around that. And even if advisors did provide estate planning services, that wasn't easy, right? We'd have to probably draft memos or write up our own presentations or do something that nowhere did not create the value chain that you've done. So you've done a really good. So you and a number of others copied you and whatever. I'm not going to get into who got there first or whatever, because I don't even know. But the reality is that it was all around the same time. So it's not surprising you all took off, because it was such a pressure, such a real need.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go back to where's the money going, right? So let's talk about that. There's only so much more you can do with estate planning services. What else are you going to do with it?
So first, I'll say it doesn't matter who gets anywhere first. This is not Talladega Nights. This is not Ricky Bobby. If you ain't first,
second, you can be third. It's fine. I was glad.
In fact, Apple is always second or third.
Oh yeah.
It's just that when they do it right, and they do it well, right? In our world, that is becoming much more apparent that's the demand from the advisory community. They don't care if it takes you 3 months, 4 months to get it out there after someone else does. What they care about is that it's accurate, it's secure, it's reliable, and that they can make it their own, that it's customizable, right? Those are the things that they really care about. And so for us, when we're developing new solutions, we could have the mentality of blitzkrieg, go as fast as possible. But instead, we are of the singular mindset right now of focus on quality. And that means bringing in top level talent. So when we're talking about deploying the capital, top level talent. And when we say talent in the wealth tech space, we're talking about sophisticated stuff. We're talking about sophisticated strategies, slats, grats, ILETs, gift sales to idiots. These are things that you don't just come out of thin air, and you don't just slap together a vibe coded slop calculator and pray for the best. What you need to have is in-house attorneys that cost a pretty penny, that are of substance, so that if they're talking to a advanced planner from a partner firm, that they're on the same wavelength. Right? So you need to have in-house subject matter expertise, but that subject matter expertise also needs to get infused into the technology itself. And so when we talk about calculators, let's just say you're looking to model out if the client is going to fund a series of rolling graphs. Yeah, you can go to Claude and you can vibe code some rolling graph calculator, but do you have an eval set against that? Do you know that every single time that is going to be 100% accurate, right? And that's the stuff that takes a serious heavy lift. And that's where it goes back to accuracy, stability, security. That's the expectation from an enterprise level vendor. And we're starting to see, Jason, today, a little bit of a bifurcation in the marketplace where the big players, the large RIAs, the wirehouses, and the independent broker dealers, they are all running toward the enterprise vendors, enterprise AI vendors. Whereas some of the independent RIAs, I think, are being a little bit more loosey-goosey on experimentation. And I'm interested personally to see how it plays out, because nobody
won't be loosey-goosey until there's proper regulation around it, right? I've talked about this many times. At least early on, it was really scary. At least now we're at the state where these companies have policies on paid accounts, especially at certain tiers, that either training is turned off by default or an option, right? So now you got the basic level thing that should be expected when the use of these is in place. But you, like, early on, there's all kinds of stuff about people feeding proprietary, like PII entities. And like, this is crazy. They've already proven that this is insecure. And yeah, I think frankly, the company, you're absolutely right. The enterprise companies really tamp down and really screech the brakes on to make sure nothing got out of control. But their experimentation's falling behind, right? And the productivity gains are going to take longer to get there because of it. But that's just how enterprise works.
Yeah, that's 100% how enterprise works. And I think that they're willing to make that bet because the trade-off, Jason, is that not a non-state actor, a state actor, Iran, North Korea, China, hacks into their system and is able to expose all client PII, or that they somehow end up becoming their client becomes the example of how a estate plan should be structured, right? And all of a sudden the client's names and the client's children's names are like the data upon which the LLM is referencing as its core example. Like, whoa, the lawsuit that erupts from that and the brand impact from that's for these companies, we're talking literally billions of dollars of market cap that can evaporate. They move down 6%, 5%. That's billions of dollars of market cap. So for them, it's like, all right, yeah, we may be behind 5 months, 6 months, but is that worth $3 billion of market cap? Is it worth the brand reputation? We're going to get there. And with the experimentation, you do the experimentation. Like, we're going to get there 6 months later. Yeah, we know that things are moving fast, but also our clients aren't going to leave us in the time frame of 6 months.
Yeah, I'm also going to say that the scale is just different, right? One small RIA screws up on that regard. It is not the same thing as every member of a major Fortune 500 listed bank being exposed. That is just a nightmare scenario.
Totally.
Yeah. All right. So your answer to date has been essentially going into the weeds. And I guess it makes perfect sense because frankly, you are just going down the complexity funnel, right? Like effectively, you started off with straightforward, simple wills and continue to add deeper and deeper and deeper functionality as you go along, which only entrenches you more and more in the marketplace. And as an advisor who's looking for a solution, maybe maybe the mass market 80-20 rule stuff is fine. And you don't play in that 20% of the market that needs the complex stuff or whatever percentage it is. That's fine. But if you have that one big client that you want to make happy, the delta is incredibly important.
That's exactly right. And that's what we see time and time again is that one big client is generating 30% of your revenue. So you want to make them happy. So you need to have the tools that can service your majority of clients and your largest client. We also find that once we're able to solve problems across the client base, the ask from our partner firms to solve more problems starts to increase, which is why we ended up introducing tax planning. We're still in the early days of tax planning. There have been firms that have been out there for a very long time, or we have our tax planning agent that can do miraculous stuff that we put out there. But we're in the early days of it because our existing partners said, hey, we want to consolidate our advanced planning functions. You already are doing a great job for us on the estate planning side. Now we want to trust you with our tax planning side as well. So we're starting to get into those waters. I think that with everything, there is a ramp up period, but we fully intend to not stop at tax planning. We're going to dually go deep into tax planning. We're not just going to stop at a certain point. We're going to go deep into it. We'll get into business tax planning, et cetera. And then we'll pick up our heads and look around and say, now that we're deep in estate planning, deep in tax planning, what else do you guys want? We obviously know because we ask our customers every day. We do a lot of user research, what's high on the next priority list, but you have to stay singularly focused. You can get so easily distracted and chasing squirrels. It's really important and your partners want you to be focused. And so you have to.
Yeah, so it makes perfect sense that here I was thinking you could expand. And yes, the tax play makes sense. It's become, at least, look, in the Gen AI world, that extraction functionality has become, at least the extraction aspects of it become largely commoditized, right? Recognition pieces are, for the most part, largely commoditized, except for the really complex contextual stuff, right? And being able to digest that. Is it a big leap for you guys to add a simple tax report extracting information? No, I've seen that same functionality added to multiple platforms now. Most notably Hazel at Altruist. which caused a massive kerfuffle with the markets, which was hilarious. Apparently, we're all apparently that's enough to blow everybody up. But overall, it also speaks to estates, right? That's why I figure you guys are going that way, because tax planning is a big part of estate planning, because that's a moment in time where both opportunity and missed opportunity basically coalesce.
Yeah, 100%. There's a interconnected web between all of these functions. When we look at estate planning, one of the key considerations is who's paying the taxes on this trust. You might create a trust. Let's say it's a grad or a slat or whatever irrevocable trust, a dynasty trust. If it's a dynasty trust for the benefit of your children, are you paying the taxes, or are you putting that burden on them? Right? Are the taxes being paid from the income that the trust generates? And so this is considered to be, is this a non-grantor trust or a grantor trust? It is literally just about who's paying the taxes, the income taxes on this entity. And so reasons that we would introduce tax planning to be able to have a much more holistic view of how the estate plan operates, because we're not just concerned about the state and federal estate taxes or the generation skipping tax. We are concerned about the actual taxes that are being paid, the income taxes from each of these entities as well. It also factors into your long-term goals and objectives with the estate plan, where you may be funding different trusts today to move money outside of your estate. And you need to understand your cash flows, because it's not a point in time. This is an entire lifetime where money is going to be in different buckets. And so you need to understand, how are these cash flows operating? Will I have enough income to sustain me if I move all this money outside of my estate? Will I have enough money if I live to 100, 110, or even 120? A lot of people are actually of the mindset that we can live decades longer with major advancements because of AI. And so all that is to say that estate planning and tax planning are fully interconnected.
Excellent. So, all right, deeper into the experience, is there beyond that extension, anything beyond that is really the question, is what I'm wondering, that you can talk about. 65 million buys a lot of depth and a lot of new Nikes for me. But that said, basically the addition of that, we'll go back to where I started this question, because then I don't think it's gonna be able to answer. So let's talk about integration and how you thought about that, right? Everybody asks for, oh, you should really integrate this other platform. And half the time they can't even explain why or what the value proposition is. And that's a battle that you all play. But I want you to talk about who you've integrated with and what kind of thoughtful way you've done it.
Yeah. So it obviously ranges. We've had off the shelf integrations that have been available for our partners. Let's say it's with other tech providers like a Adapar or a Black Diamond or an eMoney, where we're trying to reduce the friction for advisors to use both of our tools, right? And so we acknowledge that the advisor doesn't want to have to do duplicative data entry. So whatever they are inputting into those external systems will be able to be pulled into our systems and then pushed vice versa. So that is what I would consider to be off the shelf, because that is a set of API integrations that are there, accessible to any advisor that's using both of our tools, right? They type in their credentials, or they do SSO and the data transfer. You then have more bespoke integrations, and this usually comes in with large enterprise institutions that don't want to be beholden to the data that lives in one external system. They want their own data lake to be the central source of truth. So large financial institutions, we work today with 3 of the top 5 banks in the United States. They all have their data lakes. And so we're going and getting information directly from their data lakes to then feed into our system. That means that we can pull in documents that live in their document vaults. That means that we can pull in balance sheet data, owners of different assets today, beneficiaries of assets, to pre-populate in our system to be able to reduce friction. All that, Jason, though, is what I would consider to be old school integration. And the reason why I say that is because with the mass adoption of these frontier models, it's not just RIAs that are playing around with Claude and OpenAI. These are enterprises that have huge engagements, and there's forward deployed engineers inside these institutions from those frontier model providers. And so they've got Claude, or they've got OpenAI, or they've got Gemini. operating as their new central agent, right? That their advisors can chat to and get information about their client. But what do those firms not want to do? They don't want to deal with all of these specialized functions like specialized estate planning and tax planning, because it requires you to have a lot of depth of expertise built into the system. You have to have deterministic references so that the LM isn't thinking and doing math on the fly. Instead, it's hitting deterministic calculators. And you need to maintain it over time. You need to feed the beast, if you will, because tax law is a political football. Estate taxes, income taxes, all that stuff is regularly changing. So bottom line is these large institutions, they don't want to carry that burden for years and years, because they then have to hire a staff of CPAs and trust and estate attorneys and engineers to maintain it. That's millions and millions of dollars, and that's not their core competency. So instead, what they want is they want their core agent, let's call it their master agent, that they build with one of these frontier model providers, to then be able to tap into a wealth.com as a sub-agent, the same way that they'll tap into other tools as sub-agents too. And so they have one orchestrator, and then they use us as a call, essentially, when something comes up with tax planning or estate planning. That is much more of the future of integration that we see today, is agent-based. We're seeing less of agent to agent. We're seeing a lot more of MCP, where there are reference tools that can be called. And I can get into the details as to why we're seeing that. But the bottom line is even the framework of integrations is starting to shift with the AI era.
Absolutely right. Is that basically it used to be that you just push a couple pieces of data, and now everything's accessible or triggerable through it. And you hit upon something incredibly important that I keep on coming back to, and you get it because you understand how software works, but some of these AI purists don't, is that deterministic systems matter, right? No one, if you're going to ask a question about an estate or a tax bill, the reality is the answer better be right. It shouldn't be that the system determined that there was a 42% probability that it was correct, and therefore that outweighs every other probabilistic outcome. Because frankly, that's not how people think. People do not think probabilistically. They expect the answer to be correct. If as much as I love LLMs, that is one, understanding what they're great at and understanding what they're not great at and understanding what other companies are great at, and that no, you're not all going to be put out of business because the probability engine exists, is hugely important.
Yeah, I always refer back to PEMDAS. We learned this when we're school children, but like multiplication and division versus addition and subtraction. There's one that has to come first, right? And you can't get that wrong. Same thing with estate planning. If you have a direct beneficiary listed on your brokerage account, money goes to them. Okay. There's a ordering to this. Even if the brokerage account was then owned by the trust, right? The direct beneficiary takes precedent. But if, let's say, there's no beneficiary listed on the brokerage account and you individually own the assets, and then you have a pour over will and a trust, what happens when you die is there's no beneficiary listed. Let's go to the next level down of the heuristic. The next level down of the heuristic is there's no beneficiary. What do? Okay, looks like there's a will over here. Let's give it to the will. Oh, the will is actually associated with a trust. It's called pour over will. Let's dump the asset into the trust and it will get distributed that way. That is something that needs to just happen accurately every single time, right?
Yep.
But if you're going to feed a bunch of raw data to an LLM and have it go and give you the distribution scheme, because to your point, LLMs are by nature probabilistic, it's not always going to come back with the same answer time and time again. Using a tool like ours, of course, that's why we exist, is because we invest the time and energy of not only making sure that the heuristic is correct and the LLM understands that appropriate heuristic, but also that it has a definitive engine that it can reference to ensure that it is deterministic in nature.
Agreed. And it's funny because, again, everybody's an expert online every time something new happens. But I've taken classes with people at the likes of OpenAI and Anthropic, and you talk to people there and they get it. They know what the limitations of the magic box are. And they very much think that this is not cut out to do certain things. It is a wonderful, powerful tool, but it sure as heck isn't without its flaws and limitations.
And it's getting better and better. And that's to my point earlier of be a harness around the model,
Correct.
because once Claude comes out with Mythos, it's going to be light years better than Opus 4.7, right? And then whatever the next iteration of Mythos is after, it's just going to keep getting better and better. And so where we are today is not where we're going to end up. But
No.
the fact is that if you have the appropriate structure to give advisors that intuitive workflow to be able to operate their businesses, you're giving effectively the wheels, the rims, the paint job, everything around what is the chassis of the car, right? And so you make it easy for someone to just drive off the lot. Otherwise, they're going to get in the car and they're going to be like, okay, wait, hold on. I don't know how to use this thing. There's not even a windshield. What if a rock flies up from the road, right? That's my terrible analogy because I'm looking out the window at a car.
Absolutely. So before we wrap up, there's 3 questions I'd like to ask everybody to end on a positive note. And the first one is basically, if you had one wish for something you could change in your company or the industry as a whole, what would it be?
So we are predominantly a remote company today at wealth.com. We just opened up our office in New York, and I love being in person. I love being in person with my employees. So if there's one thing that I can change, it's to be able to spend a lot more time in person. I think we're just so much more productive and collaborative in person. But what I don't want to lose is the essence of what makes wealth.com wonderful, which is our people. And why our people are so productive, even in a remote culture, is because we treat them like adults. We give them accountability and responsibility. So there's a fine line there of a quote return to office versus maintaining the essence of the culture. So I don't know what to do with it. All I know is that I want to spend more time in person with my colleagues.
Yeah, it's funny. It's becoming more and more of a thing of people in the world of the remote wishing that it wasn't quite as remote. I'm not going to say going fully non-remote, but seeing more and more of that now.
Yep.
Second question I have is, what's been the biggest challenge in the company to where it is today?
I'd say our biggest strength is overcoming the obstacles. And so the challenges, they pop up every day. That's what happens when you run a startup. Every day there's a new challenge, and you just have to be, I'd say, willing to collaborate with one another and to come up with creative solutions and to not get frazzled. It's so easy to get worked up and stress. But if you do that, you're not going to survive as a startup operator. You need to just take things as they come, understand that it's a wave, and understand that this wave too will crest and pass by, but you need to deal with it effectively and overcoming those challenges and facing them head on. You got to name your monsters, Jason. You can't just be ignorant to them. You have to name your monsters. And once you name them, then you can tackle them. That is, I think, the biggest challenge, but also opportunity when running a startup business.
Fantastic. And the last question is, what keeps you getting out of bed in the morning to keep on fighting the good fight?
So I'm looking outside right now. I have a little 19-month-old Jackson, and he is the happiest go lucky kid running around, living his little toddler years out. I love being able to build something that is actually net new for the world. I've worked in other businesses where I felt like I was just moving money around. I felt like I wasn't actually generating a net new contribution to the world. Running a startup business, you're starting something from scratch. You're actually creating something net new and providing net new value. That's incredibly motivating to me. But my son and I, we do gardening, and we live on a farm in Princeton, New Jersey. And there's something about nurturing what you already have that I find to be really soothing, both in the business world and then also obviously on the farm itself, watching something grow, whether it be our cow Delilah, who we got when she was 8 months old, or if it's a plant, or if it's the business, nurturing it, watching it grow and fostering its growth. It has so much reward because you put in the effort. It's not the reward because of where it ended up. It's because of the effort that you put into it that you then see the fruits of your labor.
Fantastic. Danny, thank you so much for your time. Greatly appreciated.
Thank you, Jason.
So that was my interview with Daniel Lohrfink at wealth.com. Hopefully you enjoyed that. And if you're in the US and that appealed to you, then by all means, take a look at their platform. As always, if you enjoyed this podcast, please review on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Spotify, or wherever it is you get your podcasts. Until next time, take care.
This podcast was brought to you by Woodgate Financial, an award-winning financial planning firm catering to high net worth individuals and their families. To learn more, go to woodgate.com. You can subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play, or find more episodes at jasonpereira.ca.